It started with a flutter in my chest, like a bird panicking behind a closed window. I thought it was just indigestion, maybe the fried chicken from Clara's birthday dinner the night before. I remember brushing it off, waving it away like I'd done with so many other things. The bills piling up, the leaky faucet, the loneliness. I was standing at the kitchen sink, staring out at the bird bath I hadn't cleaned in weeks when the pain hit. A slow, searing squeeze just left of center, then radiating down my arm like lightning caught in a wire. I remember gripping the counter, the chipped laminate cool beneath my fingertips, and whispering, "Not now. Please, not now." Then darkness. When I woke up, the ceiling was white. Too white. Sterile. Silent, the kind of white that swallows you. Machines beeped softly beside me, and my hand was taped within 4. I turned my head and saw him, Nathan. My boy. He was standing stiff at the foot of the bed like he was guarding a secret. Casey, his wife, perched in the corner scrolling her phone, perfectly manicured nails clicking the screen. "You scared us, Mom," Nathan said when he noticed I was awake. "You gave us quite a fright." Casey looked up, her smile tight and polished. "We've been talking about your care plan." Care plan. I blinked, trying to process. They weren't just visiting. They were planning. Plotting, even. By the time they wheeled me out of the hospital, I didn't recognize my life. They'd moved in to help, they said. Nathan boxed up my things to make room. Casey had redecorated. My floral drapes gone. My Afghan, the one I crocheted during the blizzard of '94, folded and stashed in a bin marked donate. I was a ghost in my own home. The master bedroom, once filled with my books, my cedar chest, my life, was now theirs. I was given the guest room, a twin bed, no closet space, and I was expected to be grateful. At first I tried. I really did. I thanked them for the quinoa salad, which tasted like damp cardboard. I smiled through Casey's passive-aggressive comments about how brave I was for dressing myself. But soon the truth seeped in. They didn't move in to help. They moved in to wait. Wait for me to fall again. Wait for me to get worse. Wait for the house, the savings, the freedom I didn't even know I still had left. I overheard them one night. My hearing isn't what it used to be, but a mother knows her child's tone, even in a whisper. "She's not bouncing back," Casey said, her voice sharp as a tack. "She can't manage anymore. This place is too much. We need to act now." Nathan sighed. "She's still lucid, Case. We have to be careful." Lucid. Like I was already halfway gone. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, my heart, not the failing one, but the deeper, quieter one, cracking open. 30 years in this house. The wallpaper I picked. The stove I fought for. The garden I tended with tears in my eyes after Jim passed. And now, I was just the old woman in the back room. But they underestimated me. They forgot who raised Nathan, who balanced 3 jobs and still made birthday cakes from scratch, who fixed the car with duct tape and a prayer, who buried her husband without asking for a single hand to hold. So I got up early the next morning, earlier than them. While Casey was still snoring softly with her lavender pillow spray, I made coffee, the way I like it, strong enough to wake the dead, and sat at the kitchen table with my old black notebook. It was filled with numbers, names, accounts I hadn't touched in years, my emergency savings, CDs my father left me, bonds I'd rolled over quietly, never thinking I'd need them. But now I did. Over the next few weeks, I took my life back in slivers. I called the bank. I met with a lawyer. I pulled the deed from the safe deposit box I hadn't opened since 2009. I read every word. I canceled the auto pays Nathan had set up to make things easier. I called the pharmacist and took back control of my medication. I even drove to the courthouse. Yes, I drove and had my power of attorney revoked. They didn't notice at first. That's the funny thing about people who think they're in charge. They never look behind them. But I was coming. That night at dinner I smiled. Casey had made some kale and lentil monstrosity she called nourish stew. I said it was lovely. I complimented the texture. Then I asked about their weekend plans. She smiled back, but her eyes were wary. Maybe she sensed the shift. Maybe it was the way I sat straighter, or how I'd started using the good dishes again. Because I was back, and I wasn't going anywhere. The first thing I reclaimed was the kitchen. It may sound small, but if you've ever spent 3 decades feeding a family from a space that knew your hands better than your own reflection did, you'll understand. The kitchen had been my sanctuary, my therapy, my battlefield, my pride. Casey had turned it into a showroom, chrome gadgets, spice jars in alphabetized rows, an espresso machine I didn't know how to use and didn't want to. The counters were spotless, but cold, sterile, lifeless. She didn't cook, not really. She meal prepped, stacked plastic containers of quinoa and steamed broccoli like factory parts. One morning, I opened the window and let in the breeze. I put away her air fryer and pulled out my cast iron skillet. The smell of bacon and onions filled the house for the first time in months. Nathan wandered in, sleepy-eyed. "You're cooking." I smiled. "I'm living." He didn't respond. He just rubbed his temples and mumbled something about cholesterol. Next was the living room. They'd removed all my framed photos, my wedding day, Nathan at Little League, the dog we lost to old age, and replaced them with abstract prints in pale pastels. The kind of art that never says anything. I found the box of my things in the attic. I took my time hanging each frame back in place. One by one, every memory returned to the wall like a soldier coming home. When Casey saw it, she didn't say a word. She just picked up her keys and left for yoga. I didn't ask where. I didn't care. Because I had remembered something vital. This house was mine. Still was. And I had every right to live in it, not just exist. But I wasn't done. The real turning point came on a Wednesday afternoon, when I found the paperwork. I'd gone into the garage to grab a box of mason jars. I decided to make strawberry preserves like I used to because why not? And there it was. A manila envelope wedged under a box labeled Holiday Lights. Inside were documents I hadn't seen. Things I hadn't signed. Or so I thought. It was a draft of a living trust with Casey's handwriting in the margins. Her notes. Her arrows. Her assumptions that the house would be hers. A place for a home office expansion was written beside the den. My den. They were planning to erase me in ink. That night, I sat in my room, the envelope in my lap, and stared at the wall. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. Instead, a strange calm washed over me. Like the calm you feel just before a storm when the sky darkens, but everything is still. I picked up the phone and called Velma. Velma had been my best friend since 8th grade. We'd shared locker space, lip gloss, and labor pains. Her second boy and my only child were born 2 weeks apart. We hadn't spoken much in recent years. Life gets in the way. But when she picked up and heard my voice, her first words were, "Took you long enough." We laughed for a full minute. A real, belly-shaking, snot-snickering laugh. "I need to ask you something," I said when we caught our breath. "Ask away. Would you let me rent your back cottage for a few months? I can pay." Velma didn't hesitate. "You're not paying me a dime. Pack your things." It wasn't the final move. Not yet. But it was the first brick out of the wall. I began downsizing in secret. Box by box. Drawer by drawer. Every night while Nathan and Casey were glued to the TV or arguing over keto recipes, I was quietly reclaiming myself. I sorted. I shredded. I packed. And when the time came, I'd be ready. Because they thought they had me cornered. But I had fire in my blood. And a plan in motion. The morning I left, it rained. Not a heavy storm. Just that soft southern drizzle that feels more like a whisper than a warning. I woke up early, before Nathan's alarm, before Casey's blender started whirring for her green juice ritual, and stood at my window, watching the droplets collect on the sill. I thought about all the mornings I'd spent in that house, all the storms I'd weathered inside it. It was time. I'd packed 2 suitcases and 3 boxes, the essentials only. My notebooks, my photo albums, my mother's quilt, faded but still soft. I left behind the fancy espresso machine and the untouched throw pillows Casey arranged like a showroom. They could keep the appearance of control. Velma pulled up at exactly 6:45 a.m. in her rust-colored Buick, just like she said she would. She didn't get out, just waited, engine humming like a lullaby. I left a note on the kitchen counter. Simple, Polite. Final. Thank you for your concern. I'm fine now. Please forward any mail. Mom. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. Velma's place was nothing fancy, but it felt like a palace. A little white cottage behind her house with its own screened-in porch, a creaky floor, and a floral couch that had seen too many family holidays. It smelled like cinnamon and lemon oil. Like warmth. Like home. You sure about this? She asked as we unloaded the last box. I nodded. I should have done it sooner. We sat on her porch that night, sipping sweet tea and listening to crickets sing over the marshland. I told her everything about the hospital, the takeover, the documents, the plans they'd made for my life without my input. You still got that fight in you, Velma said, pointing her glass at me. You just needed to remember where you put it. That was the night I decided to do more than leave. I decided to rise. The next week was a flurry of firsts. I got my hair trimmed, not just the usual tidy-up, but a real shape. A cut with sass, as Velma called it. I bought a planner. I called a financial advisor who had once helped a friend of mine sort out her late husband's estate. His name was Marvin, and he listened without judgment, then looked over my assets and said, "Well, now, this is interesting." Turns out, I had more power than I thought. That CD I'd started when Nathan was born, worth triple now. The land in Ashland County my cousin left me, oil rights had just opened up in the area. Marvin helped me move everything into a trust with my name at the top. No co-signers, no Casey, no Nathan. Then came the call. Casey, of course. Mom, where are you? Nathan's worried sick. I could hear the irritation under the concern, like perfume trying to cover a bad smell. I'm safe, I said. I'm with a friend. She paused, thrown off by how calm I sounded. You should have told us. We could have figured something out. I figured it out myself, I said, and hung up. 2 days later, I drove back to the house. Not to move back in, just to collect what was mine. My attorney met me there. So did Velma, standing with her arms crossed like a sentinel. I walked through the front door and didn't flinch when I saw Casey's lemon-colored heels in the entryway, or Nathan's golf bag by the stairs. You can't just show up, Casey said, rising to her full height. I'm not here to argue, I said. I'm here to reclaim. I had the paperwork, the documents they didn't see coming, the ones that said I still held ownership. They could stay a little longer, but not much. A formal eviction notice would follow in 30 days. Casey paled. Nathan didn't say a word, and I walked out a free woman. The 30 days came and went. I didn't see them off when they left. I didn't need to. I heard through Velma, who had a niece that worked part-time at the grocery store near my old neighborhood, that they were stunned. No tears, no dramatic goodbye. Just Casey muttering something about ungratefulness, and Nathan looking, for once, like the child he used to be, lost and ashamed. The house was mine again. Empty. Quiet. Mine. I stood in the foyer the day I returned, keys in hand, and let the silence greet me. The kind of silence that wraps around your shoulders like a shawl, not the cold kind they left behind. There were a few scuffs on the walls, a broken cabinet hinge in the kitchen, and the guest room still smelled like Casey's rosehip diffuser. But it was still my home. I opened every window and let the air in. I stripped the beds, burned sage, yes, Velma insisted, and cranked on the old record player in the den. Etta James filled the house, rich and mournful and strong. And I danced, alone, arms up, toes light, heart open. It felt like resurrection. Over the next few weeks, I brought the house back to life, room by room. I repainted the guest room in pale green and renamed it the sewing room. I brought in a sturdy table from the garage and set up my old machine. It whirred to life like it had been waiting for me. The living room saw the return of my photos, not in a collage or some digital frame, but in mismatched wooden ones I had collected over the years. Nathan's third-grade school photo, Jim's favorite picture from our honeymoon, me holding a newborn in hospital scrubs, tears in my eyes and hope in my arms. I even tackled the garden with Velma's help. We tore out Casey's pebble path and laid fresh mulch, planted daisies and tomatoes, put a little bench under the dogwood tree Jim planted our first spring in the house. That bench became my morning spot, coffee in hand, sun on my face, birds gossiping in the branches above. I wasn't just healing. I was building something new. Word got around, as it does in towns like ours. The bank teller asked if I was okay. The pharmacist gave me an extra smile. Even Pastor Rick from St. Luke's called to check in and see if I needed prayers or casseroles. I declined politely. I didn't need pity. I needed purpose. That's when I found the flyer, taped to the bulletin board at the library. Needle and thread, sewing group for seniors. Tuesday mornings, community center basement. I hadn't been to the community center in years, not since the fall festival before Jim's diagnosis, but something about the flyer pulled me in. The first meeting, I sat quiet in the back, watched women laugh and thread needles with fingers more practiced than mine. There was a rhythm to their chatter, a melody of memory and mending. By week 3, I was sharing patterns. By week 5, I was teaching them. That room, with its dusty windows and chipped tile floors, became my sanctuary. And just when I thought life had given all it had left, something unexpected happened. A knock at my door. Nathan, alone. No designer wife, no clipboard, no plan. Just him, holding a paper bag and a bouquet of sunflowers, my favorite, though I never told him that. "Can I come in?" he asked. I looked at him, really looked. He seemed older, softer. "Only if you're here to listen," I said, and he nodded. Nathan sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same one he used to sit at every morning before school, eating cereal and asking impossible questions about dinosaurs and stars. The paper bag he brought held cinnamon rolls, still warm, still smelling like forgiveness. He didn't start with an apology. Not really. Just small talk. Weather. Work. Some comment about how quiet things had been lately. I let him talk. I stirred my coffee slowly, giving him room. But when he finally looked up and met my eyes, I saw it. Shame. The real kind. "Mom," he said. I didn't realize how bad it got. "What we did, how we made you feel." I said nothing. Let the silence answer for me. Casey had left, he told me. Not because of me, though maybe I was the final straw. She'd gotten tired of pretending too, it seemed. And Nathan, well, he'd been left with his own silence. No house, no plans, no mother waiting quietly in the corner to save the day. "I read your note," he said. It hit me harder than I expected. I nodded. That note wasn't for you to understand. It was for me to finally say. He blinked. "So you're not mad?" "Oh, I was mad," I said, a little laugh escaping. I was furious, but that passed. Now I'm just done being invisible. He nodded again, slower this time, like he was chewing on something hard. "You really did all this alone." Velma helped, and the Lord, and maybe a little bit of spite. That made him laugh. The sound cracked the ice between us. We talked for over an hour. Not everything was said. Not everything had to be. But I saw the boy he used to be peek out from behind the man he became. And that was enough for now. When he left, he hugged me. Tight. Too tight. "I'll be better," he said. "We'll see," I replied, not unkindly. After he left, I sat in the sewing room, letting the hum of the machine soothe me. I didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, I pulled out a fresh piece of fabric, plum-colored, rich and full of promise. A new quilt. My quilt. Each square a memory. Each stitch a truth. Not for anyone else. Just for me. Later that week, the sewing group nominated me for the community fundraiser. We were going to make quilts for the women's shelter downtown. I accepted. We needed 20 by winter. I promised them 30. And for the first time in a long time, I felt useful, not in the way they had used me, but in the way I chose to be. Because I wasn't just healing anymore. I was thriving. A few weeks passed. The house settled into a new rhythm, quiet but not lonely. I spent mornings on the porch, afternoons stitching with the ladies at the community center, and evenings baking things I hadn't made in years. Peach cobbler, chicken pot pie, recipes that tasted like memory. Then one morning a letter arrived. Not a bill, not a flyer, a real letter, in an envelope with my name written in neat, careful script. It was from Casey. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, just staring at it. I almost didn't open it. But curiosity won out over pride. Dear Margaret, it began. Not Mom, not even Mrs. Davis. She wrote about how things had spiraled, about how she had lost herself trying to control everything, about how she thought she was protecting Nathan, protecting their future, but in the process had forgotten that the past, the woman who raised him, mattered too. I was wrong, she wrote. I see that now, and I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted to say it. She ended with a line that caught me off guard. I don't know if you'll ever speak to me again, but I hope you'll know I'm trying to be better than I was. I read it twice, then again. It didn't change everything, but it changed something. I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and sat in silence for a moment. The kind of silence that's not heavy, but reflective. Later that week, I mentioned it to Velma. She wrote to you? Velma asked, her eyebrow arching like a skeptical nun's. She did. And you gonna write back? I smiled. Maybe, but not today, because I wasn't ready to open that door, not yet. But it felt good to know she'd knocked. Meanwhile, the quilting project was in full swing. We'd stitched 12 already, and each one told a story, some with sunbursts, others with hearts and home shapes, and one with a stitched-on phrase that made me tear up, "You're still whole." I donated one of my own for the first batch. It was the one I'd started that day Nathan brought the cinnamon rolls. It had a plum center, gold trim, and a little patch in the corner with my initials, Margaret Elaine Davis. It felt right to give that name to someone else, a woman trying to start over, a woman who might feel as discarded as I once did. That week, I also started journaling again, but not just for myself. I started writing my story, the heart attack, the invasion, the quiet uprising, not to shame them, not to boast, but to remind myself and maybe someone else that just because you've been knocked down doesn't mean you don't still have legs to stand on. And just because they moved in like I was gone doesn't mean I ever truly left. By early October, the quilts were finished. 35 to be exact. We tied the last ribbon on the final one, a deep navy piece with embroidered vines, just as the leaves began turning in the park across from the community center. We boxed them up and delivered them to the shelter with little tags that read, "You are loved. You are seen." The director cried when she saw them. That same week, Velma came stomping into my kitchen with her Sunday shoes and a flyer in hand. "Margaret, we're signing you up." "For what now?" I asked, half laughing, half dreading. "The fall fundraiser auction. They need entries. And you're going to make one of your famous hand-stitched aprons. The one with the scallop trim. I hadn't made that apron in years. Not since Jim was alive. I don't know, Velma." She looked at me like I'd grown two heads. "You faced down a heart attack and Casey's decor. You can face an apron pattern." So I did. I pulled out my old design, ironed the fabric myself, and stitched it by hand while Etta James played softly in the background. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon, and every thread was like a step forward. Healing wasn't loud, it was steady. The apron turned out better than I remembered. Cream with red piping, tiny apples embroidered along the hem. I folded it carefully and brought it to the auction table myself. The night of the event, I wore my best blouse, the one I'd bought but never worn to Nathan's house, because Casey said, "We're keeping it casual." It still had the tag. People smiled when they saw me. Not just the tight-lipped neighborly smiles, but real ones. A few women hugged me. One even whispered, "You're the reason I brought mine today." When the apron came up on stage, I didn't look. But when it sold for $180, I felt a rush that had nothing to do with money. Afterward, I stood on the edge of the room, a cup of cider in hand, when a younger woman approached. Maybe 35. Soft curls, tired eyes. "Are you Margaret Davis?" she asked. I nodded. "I bought your apron. My grandmother used to wear one just like it." She looked down for a moment, then back at me. I haven't felt close to her in a long time. Until I saw that. And just like that, the world tilted a little more in the right direction. I smiled. "Take good care of it." She nodded. "I will." Driving home that night, Velma beside me rambling about the apple pie judging controversy, I felt something settle deep inside me. A kind of peace I hadn't known in years. I wasn't erased. I wasn't expired. I was still writing new chapters. One Thursday morning, just as I was steeping tea and listening to the gentle hum of the sewing machine, finishing a set of placemats, the doorbell rang. It was Nathan. Again. But this time, he wasn't holding flowers or baked goods. He was holding his son, my grandson, Liam, wide-eyed and quiet, clutching a small blue backpack. I didn't know where else to go, Nathan said. Can we stay a night or two? It caught me off guard. Not because he was there, but because he'd brought Liam. It was the first time since everything happened that he'd let me near that boy without hesitation. Liam looked up at me and smiled. A small, shy smile. Hi, Grandma, he said softly. That was all it took. I stepped aside and let them in. The house had changed, more color, more warmth, but Nathan walked in like it still belonged to him. I watched him glance around at the photos I'd rehung. The apron hanging by the stove, the jar of sewing buttons on the shelf where liquor bottles used to sit. That night, after Liam fell asleep in the guest room, my guest room now, I asked Nathan what was going on. He sighed long and heavy. We're separated. Casey moved out. Took the rest of her things last weekend. She's in Atlanta now. I waited. She said, I don't know how to be present. That I'm always planning, never listening. She's right, I think. And then, quieter. I think I learned it from watching how I treated you. That hit hard. Not because I wanted guilt or revenge, but because acknowledgement after all this time felt like the rarest gift. We talked until nearly midnight. About him. About me. About what it means to show up. About mistakes. Regret. Love. When he went to bed, I sat alone in the kitchen, the tea long gone cold, staring at the porch light dancing shadows across the hardwood floor. And I felt something loosen inside me, like a knot that had been held too tightly for too long, finally letting go. The next day, Liam helped me in the garden. He asked about the daisies, about the quilt squares hanging to dry, about the painting of his grandpa in the hallway. You miss him, he asked. Every day, I said. Liam nodded. I miss you when we don't come here. That simple sentence brought tears to my eyes in a way no apology ever had. Later that week, I taught Liam how to stitch a name into fabric. His first attempt was wobbly, but he grinned like he'd sewn the stars. And in that moment, with the sun warm on my back and the thread pulling through the cloth, I realized this was what I'd reclaimed. Not just the house, not just independence, but legacy. It was a gray Tuesday afternoon when the phone rang. I was folding laundry, still warm from the dryer, humming along to Patsy Cline and thinking about whether to plant tulips or daffodils come spring. The caller ID made me pause, unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something in my gut told me to pick up. Hello. A silence, then Margaret? It was Casey. Her voice had changed, quieter, strained, like someone who'd been holding her breath for too long. I hope it's okay that I called, she began. Nathan gave me your number. I've been meaning to reach out. I didn't say anything at first. Just let her speak. She told me she'd been going through some things, that she was seeing a counselor, that the move to Atlanta wasn't what she expected, that she'd been thinking about our last few months together, how she handled them, and how she'd handle me. You were right, she said, about everything, about the way I bulldozed in and treated your home like it was a project. You were gracious when I was awful. Still, I said nothing. Not yet. And I know I can't undo it, she continued, but I wanted to say I'm sorry. Not because I want anything, but because I owe you that much. There it was, the words I thought I'd never hear. I appreciate you calling, I said, steady and kind. I really do. She exhaled, relieved. That's more than I deserve. We talked for another 10 minutes. Nothing deep, nothing binding, just enough to close a door that had been left swinging too long on broken hinges. After we hung up, I sat in the sunroom, watching light dance through the lace curtains, and thought about how far I'd come. 6 months ago, I was laid out in a hospital bed, feeling like my life had been reduced to a waiting game, waiting to heal, waiting to matter again, waiting for someone to notice. But now I had my house, my routine, my sewing group, my mornings with Liam, my own name on everything that counted. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was living. The next day, I began sketching out plans for a new quilt series, this one just for me. Each square would be a symbol of what I'd reclaimed: a needle for resilience, a rose for grace, a key for freedom, and one square, stitched in plum thread, would simply say, "Still here." Spring arrived with a whisper. One morning I woke to birdsong, not the sharp cries of crows, but the sweet, hesitant chirps of finches nesting in the dogwood outside my bedroom window. The air smelled like warm earth and old promises. I stood at the window, a cup of tea in my hand, and watched as light spilled across the floor, painting everything gold. The tulips Liam and I had planted back in the fall bloomed, like they had something to prove. Rows of red and yellow and soft lavender danced along the walkway, stubborn and proud. Just like me, I was proud of that little patch of color, of this whole house, of myself. One day, as I was arranging fresh-cut flowers in an old blue mason jar, Velma had given it to me years ago, said it was her grandmother's. I heard the mail slot click. I wiped my hands and walked to the door. Among the grocery ads and the electric bill was a thick envelope with a wax seal and elegant script. It was from the Charleston Women's Guild. I nearly dropped it. Apparently, someone from my quilting circle, probably Velma, that rascal, had sent in an anonymous submission to their yearly publication, Southern Women of Substance, Stories of Quiet Strength. They wanted to feature me. At first I laughed. Then I cried. Then I laughed again, which is usually how I deal with things that feel bigger than me. The letter asked for a short write-up, a personal quote, and a recent photo. I sat down at my old writing desk, the one Jim built for me back when we had more dreams than money, and took a long breath. I wrote my piece in one sitting. I didn't name names, didn't tell tales out of school, just the truth. I wrote about losing my voice and finding it again, not through shouting, but through choosing. I wrote about being overlooked, then learning to see myself again. I wrote about the weight of silence and the power that comes from quietly reclaiming what's yours. For the quote, I chose something that had grown inside me these past months. They mistook my silence for surrender, but I was just waiting to rise. The photo was harder. I hadn't been in front of a camera in a while, not since Casey's Instagram era, where everything was filtered and posed. But Velma insisted. She came over the next afternoon with her niece's fancy camera and a basket of sunflowers from the Saturday market. We stood in the garden, the quilt I'd made hanging on the clothesline behind me, tulips blooming at my feet. I wore the hand-stitched apron from the fundraiser and a soft blue blouse that brought out my eyes. Velma made me laugh mid-photo. A real, teeth showing, eyes crinkled kind of laugh. That was the picture I sent. A few weeks later, the journal arrived. Glossy cover, thick pages. My hands trembled as I turned to my page. There I was, centered on a page with ivory borders. My story in print. My name bold. My photo, real and unfiltered. For once, I wasn't a footnote in someone else's narrative. I was the headline. I set the journal on the coffee table like it was a crown. That night, Liam came by after school with a crumpled art project in his backpack and a purple jelly stain on his chin. He saw the magazine and asked, "Grandma, why is your picture in a book?" I told him the truth, because I had a story worth telling. Nathan came the following weekend with a box of fresh muffins and a lawnmower he'd finally remembered to fix. He saw the magazine too. He didn't say much, just ran his hand over the page and smiled, a little ashamed, a little proud. "Good picture," he said. "It's more than a picture," I replied gently. "It's proof of survival, of strength, of becoming." After they left, I sat in the sunroom, tea in hand, lights spilling across the floor just like that morning months ago when this journey began. And I whispered to myself, just to hear it aloud. I'm still here, still standing, and finally fully seen.